I have a very busy and dynamic job. And many of us can be in that position, whether we think we're raising a family or have outside distractions that take us away from going inward. I often think of walking away and living a more contemplative life, but I've been in Bhagavan's teachings long enough not to romanticize those thoughts for too long. The question is about the mechanics of surrender. I currently have the practice of that in a journal form, daily writing to Bhagavan, and humbly giving him whatever is weighing me down at the moment. So that's everyday surrender, which I haven't thought of before, speaking for myself. An example would be, Brian says, "Beloved Bhagavan, I humbly lay at your feet whatever the specific thing that is stressing me out at the time is, parenthetically. May your will prevail, and may this body merely be your instrument." Now, last point. This seems to ease my mind, and so I can be free enough to practice self-investigation while these things are happening at the same time. Is this a good practice, Michael, or would you have other recommendations for surrender in dynamic, daily, universal life situations?
This type of attitude is what is required to be in a surrendering frame of mind. And if it helps you writing in a journal, well and good. I mean, whatever helps there's no right and wrong in these things. But merely writing in the journal is not the surrender. It's the attitude of mind. Even the attitude of mind is only the beginning of surrender. The real surrender is subsiding back within. We can subside back within only to the extent to which we hold on to self-attentiveness. That is, in verse 25 of Ulladu, Bhagavan has revealed to us the nature of ego. In that verse, in the last line, he describes ego as a formless pay. Pay means a demon, an evil spirit, a phantom, something that will possess will possess a body. That's why he uses that term. So it's a demonic phantom, but it has possessed this body. But it itself is formless. So it is formless because it has no form of its own. It is a phantom or a spirit because it's got no substance of its own. Its substance, that is its existence and its awareness, it borrows from Sat-Chit in the form of the fundamental awareness I am. And its form, it borrows from a body. So it's aware of itself as I am this body. The I am portion of ego is borrowed from Sat-Chit. The form of this body, the form of ego, that is the body, is borrowed from the body. So, but ego is neither Sat-Chit nor is it the body. It's some spurious entity that rises between the two. And then, so in the last line he describes it as that. But how he begins the verse is by saying, and this is talking about ego, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. From this, it is clear that the very nature of ego is to grasp form. Since ego is formless, whatever forms it grasps are things other than itself. So what Bhagavan means by form is objects or phenomena. The first object we as ego grasp, as soon as we rise as ego, is we grasp the form of a body as ourself. And we continue grasping the form of a body as ourself, thus we endure. So what he means in the first two clauses, when he says, grasping form, it comes into existence, grasping form, it stands, is that as soon as we rise as ego, we grasp the form of a body as ourself, and we continue grasping that form so long as it's only by continuing to grasp that form that we as ego stand or endure. And then he goes on to say, grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes abundantly. That is, having grasped this form of this body as ourself, we are constantly grasping on other forms. That is, perceptions, memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, likes, dislikes. We're constantly clinging to things other than ourselves. How do we, since we are a formless phantom, how do we grasp forms? What Bhagavan means by grasp is we grasp in our awareness. In other words, we attend to and are aware of those things. By attending to anything other than ourselves, we are thereby feeding and nourishing ourselves. That is why he then says, after saying leaving form at grasp form, that's just to emphasize that ego cannot stand for a moment without grasping form. But he then says, Tedinal otum pidicum. Tedinal literally means if searching, if seeking. There's neither subject nor object there, but it's understood. If ego seeks its own reality, is what is implied. Otum pidicum, it takes flight. In other words, it runs away. Why? Because we seem to be ego only so long as we're grasping other things. If we try to grasp ourselves, there's no such thing as ego to be found. So to the extent to which we attend to things other than ourselves, we as ego rise and flourish and grow big and fat and strong. To the extent to which we turn our attention back within to investigate ourselves, we thereby subside. So how are we to surrender ourselves? So long as we attend to anything other than ourselves, we are feeding ourselves. That's not surrendering ourselves. In order to surrender ourselves, we need to turn our attention back within. Then only will ego subside. So we cannot surrender ourselves without investigating ourselves. That doesn't mean that surrender begins with self-investigation, because before we come to this path of self-investigation, we can start by surrendering our will to Bhagavan. We can start giving up our likes and dislikes. Not my will, your will. May your will prevail, as you say. So what you're writing in the book, that is all very good for surrendering our will. But we can surrender our will only to a certain extent without surrendering ourselves. In order to surrender our will fully, we need to surrender ourselves, because the very nature of ego is to have a will of its own. So in order to surrender our will completely, we need to surrender ourselves. That's why Bhagavan called it self-surrender, ātma-samapanam. Atma there means not our self as we actually are. Obviously, we cannot surrender what we actually are. We can only surrender what we now seem to be, namely ego. So the Atma in ātma-samapanam is ego. So we are surrendering ego. How can we surrender ego? Only by self-investigation. So in order, though the path of surrender begins on the bhakti marga, even when we're still taking God to be something other than ourselves, we can be, that is, devotees are beginning on the path of surrender. But in order for the surrender to become complete, we need to surrender not only our will, not only all our possessions, and give everything. We need to give ourselves to God. And the only way to give ourselves, that means this ego, to God, is to investigate ourselves. So when you ask about the mechanics of surrender, surrender begins with the attitude, not my will, your will. As Bhagavan has expressed it beautifully in the second verse of Arunachal Patikam, where he says, Ninishtam enishtam, your will is my will. That means I have no will of my own. Whatever you want for me, that is what I want. I don't want anything else. Ninishtam enishtam, your will is my will. Imbadaku, that means that is happiness for me. So whatever if it's your will to put me in hell, I'm perfectly happy in hell, because that is your will. Such should be the attitude of surrender we have. That attitude is very, very important. If we don't have that attitude, we will not be able to go very deep in this path of self-investigation. So having that attitude, that is the foundation of surrender. But actually, to go deep in the surrender, we need to turn our attention back within. Brian, is that a sufficiently clear answer to your question.
Yes, Michael, thank you very much.
But
I'm not sure I'm perfectly happy being put in hell for a while.
then you're not, none of us will be, because we're not surrendered. But if you want to be happy in hell, there's only one way to surrender. And if we recognize the truth, even this life is hell.
Intellectually, I'm there. I could be in hell and be fine.
Yeah.
With Ramana.
Yeah, in practice, it would be a bit difficult, but being in hell would be a very good opportunity to surrender ourselves. When our life is nice and cozy, our surrender is very superficial. If you really want to surrender yourself, you should pray to Bhagavan, put me in hell so that I can surrender myself to you.
Let's not get greedy now. I think you're helping. I'm supposing you might be helping people like McNair and others who are grieving right now. That's akin to being in hell.
It is. We experience. We don't have to wait till the afterlife to experience the fruit of our past sins. We're experiencing the fruit of them day in, day out. There's so many forms of suffering in this life.